What's up, Taiwan? I'm Eric Gao, bringing you the news from Taipei. Thanks for joining us. Taiwan's largest annual military drills, the Hangguang exercises, are officially underway. For the next 5 days, the country is simulating how it would respond to an attack from China. Jaime Okan takes a closer look at what's involved.
Now, this year is the 40th edition of the Hangguang exercises. It's Taiwan's largest military drills that have been carried out since 1984. And the goal is to simulate how to defend against an all-out invasion from China. Now, this year, we're going to see a couple of key components from the military drills. On the first couple of days, we're going to see dozens of Taiwan's military aircraft fly from the west coast, that side that's closer to China. These bases here, those aircraft are going to be repositioning and flying and basing in the east coast of the island. And they're doing that to get away from the front line and to provide better protection because Taiwan doesn't have as many military aircraft as China does. Now, further in the week, we're going to see live fire exercises on the outlying islands of Taiwan only. That's Penghu, Matsu, and Jinmen. The MND says that this year they will not be conducting any live fire drills on the main island for safety concerns. Further down the week, we're also going to see a lot of airport defense shows. Now, Taiwan has several airports along the west coast and major cities, but the largest airport, Taoyuan International Airport, will close and suspend flights for about an hour on the 25th to allow the military to practice how to defend against an attack as the enemy would need these ports to provide more troops for that invasion. But the big thing about Hangguang this year is all about decentralization, as these drills for the first time are unscripted. Now, for more on what that means, I spoke to Alessio Patalano. He's a war studies professor at the King's College in London.
Now, Hangguang historically has always been first and foremost about domestic reassurance and cross-strait signaling. It was about communicating to both audiences in Taiwan and, if you want, observers in China, how seriously defense of Taiwan was taken by Taiwanese authorities. The interesting thing about it this year is that the emphasis that the new minister has put on this idea of exercising and testing decentralize the command and control function and therefore the resilience of the military. Why? Because exercises and training are the conditions in which different units in a theatre may or may not be able to remain in close contact with the headquarters is absolutely essential in a context in which we know if ever there were to be high intensity crisis scenarios or indeed kinetic occurrences across the straits, the survivability of different units will be absolutely central to the Taiwanese capacity to respond effectively.
Now, Alessio, in talking about this decentralization idea and the fact that these drills are unscripted, is that a step towards more realistic combat training for Taiwan?
It definitely is. This is definitely what you would expect it to be, and in particular, this is where, for example, if you see in sort of complex exercises in both in the NATO or NATO members kind of context, that has become now a routine, a real world sort of combat experience for as much as it can be replicated, and relies heavily on adaptation and the capacity to adjust to conditions that sometimes you cannot foresee. So training for the unexpected, thinking on your feet, be quick about it. These are really important elements of any realistic and viable type of training these days.
That was Alessio Patalano, professor of war studies at King's College London. Stay with us all this week as we continue our coverage of the Hangguang exercise. Now, the military says it detected a Chinese drone circling Taiwan as it began the Hangguang drills. It said the drone circled the country's main island and crossed into its Air Defense Identification Zone, or ADIZ. It came as close as 67 kilometers to Taiwan's southernmost point. 12 Chinese military aircraft and 7 warships were also detected operating in the area. Now, this is the 6th time since April of 2023 that a Chinese drone has circumnavigated Taiwan. U.S. President Joe Biden has dropped out of the race for the White House after growing concerns he's not fit for office. And he's endorsing his vice president, Kamala Harris, as the Democratic nominee to take on Donald Trump. Joyce Tseng has the latest.
Mr. President, how do you feel? How do you feel?
Despite a COVID diagnosis, a thumbs up from U.S. President Joe Biden the last time he was seen in public. Just days later, he posted a game-changing decision on social media to end his bid for re-election, saying he would stand down and focus on finishing out his term. Democrats and voters have been losing faith in Biden's mental fitness to beat Donald Trump, now officially the Republican presidential nominee.
Going back, I think this was all Biden's fault. I think he made a lot of really critical errors. He's the power of the incumbent in an election, and he acted like the outsider. He didn't have to do that debate. He didn't have to do all these things, but he put himself in the position that where this letter had to come out today was all him and him only.
In recent months, Biden's performance has sparked concerns about his mental acuity, from stumbling through a televised presidential debate to sensitive gaffes at a recent historic NATO summit.
And now I want to hand it over to the president of Ukraine, who has as much courage as he has determination. Ladies and gentlemen, President Putin. President Putin. He's going to beat President Putin. President Zelensky.
Now, some relief among American voters that there's a new way forward.
That it was a brave decision for him to step down, well, to pull himself out of the race. I think it was the correct one.
I am glad that Biden stepped down. You know, we've been really concerned about his policy towards Palestine and his, full-throated support for Israel and the ongoing genocide against the Palestinians.
The 81-year-old incumbent is now backing his vice president, Kamala Harris, to lead the Democratic ticket in the race for the White House. If elected president, Harris would likely continue many of Biden's foreign policies, including backing Ukraine against Russia and Taiwan's self-defense against China. Harris met Taiwan's leader, Lai Ching-te, back in 2022 in Honduras, when both were vice presidents representing their nations at the inauguration of President Xiomara Castro. Harris also spoke with Taiwan's envoy to APEC in San Francisco last November, chipmaker TSMC's founder Morris Chang. Despite Biden's support, Democrats have yet to name Harris as their official pick. It would be a historic nomination that would catapult the former California Attorney General, a child of Indian and Jamaican immigrants, to become the leader of a major party ticket.
The question for Vice President Harris is not whether can a woman win the presidency. It's can Vice President Harris win. Her approval ratings as vice president are not great. In fact, in kind of the current polling, the matchups against former President Trump, she's faring only kind of marginally better than President Biden. However, Vice President Harris is really probably the Democrat with the only Democrat with the visibility to mount a strong campaign in this time, less than 4 months before Election Day.
Trump has claimed that Harris will be easier to beat than Biden, appearing prepared to take on his potential new opponent, airing an ad targeting Harris just moments after Biden dropped out.
Kamala was in on it. She covered up Joe's obvious mental decline.
Many Democrats have quickly backed Harris, but others say the party should hold a mini primary. With time running out before the Democratic National Convention in August, pressure is on the party to use this major opportunity to draw up a stronger route to the White House. Patrick Chen and Joyce Sen for TaiwanPlus.
China and the Philippines have reached an agreement on a shoal in the South China Sea that both have claims to. It's become the site of violent clashes between Philippine and Chinese ships, but details of the agreement are unclear. To find out more about it, reporter Rick Lauert spoke to Ray Powell of Stanford University.
So what exactly do we know about the agreement that China and the Philippines have supposedly made about the second Thomas Shoal? What are they trying to solve, and what progress have they made?
So what they've been trying to solve is the question of how much freedom does the Philippines have to resupply its outpost at the second Thomas Shoal in the manner it chooses to do so. And for the Philippines, it's a matter of principle. It's a matter of sovereign rights. It's a matter of freedom of navigation. It's a matter of, not surrendering jurisdiction over its own outpost. For China, which of course claims the outpost is illegal because China claims almost the entirety of the South China Sea, it is trying to strong-arm the Philippines into essentially abandoning its rights. So China seems to have been willing to allow a certain amount of resupply as long as it was able to inspect any resupplies and not allow any, quote, construction materials out to the Sierra Madre.
Why has China, Beijing, come to the table to discuss this with the Philippines?
Well, I do think that China has suffered very great reputational harm on the international stage through its visible aggression. And of course, the Philippines has played its part in that by generating and releasing all of these extremely evocative photos and video that have shown its own country people and the world how aggressive China has been. So China, this is a kind of a bleeding wound that China would like to stop. And, you know, I mean, look at what harm China has faced. It has essentially succeeded through its aggression in uniting its potential adversaries against it. You've seen all of these new agreements between the Philippines, United States, and Japan, with some participation from Australia.
Why would it be in the Philippines and China, and perhaps even the region's best interest for a de-escalation in this area?
Sometimes it's in a nation's national interest to go ahead and escalate or to allow escalation. In China's sense, or in China's view on things, escalation often works in order to sort of normalize a new aggression. So, for example, off of Jinmen Island in Taiwan, you had the escalation after the death of the two fishermen in February that has, since China has tried to exploit that to normalize increasingly aggressive patrols around Jinmen under the pretext of protecting its fishermen. So escalation is a tactic of China, but it tends to escalate in ways that it thinks that it can sort of win the victory by normalizing a new aggression. In this case, the Philippines has been unwilling to sort of allow the normalization by capitulating and allowing China to sort of win the argument.
That was Ray Powell of Stanford University speaking to our reporter Rick Glowert. Curfews have been eased in Bangladesh after the country's top court scrapped most of the quotas on government jobs that had sparked deadly protests. A lower court had reserved 30% of jobs for relatives of people who fought for independence from Pakistan in 1971. That led to deadly unrest, with 114 people killed in student-led protests. They were arguing the quotas were unfair at a time of economic decline. The Supreme Court overturned the ruling, saying 93% of government jobs should be open to all candidates based off merit.
সেই সমাধানটি হচ্ছে বর্তমান প্রেক্ষাপটকে বিবেচনা করে মুক্তিযোদ্ধাদের জন্য 5% থাকবে, সাধারণ কোটা থাকবে 93%, আর 7% কোটা থাকবে। তার মধ্যে 5% হতে মুক্তিযোদ্ধা, তার সন্তান এবং তার পুত্রদের, নাতি নাতনিদের জন্য, আর 1% হচ্ছে নৃগোষ্ঠী যারা রয়েছে, ক্ষুদ্র নৃগোষ্ঠী তাদের জন্য, আর 1% হচ্ছে প্রতিবন্ধী এবং তৃতীয় লিঙ্গ।
South Korea is ramping up its propaganda broadcasts on the border with North Korea. It comes after the North resumed floating trash-filled balloons into South Korea on Sunday. Pyongyang had promised to halt the action less than a month ago. Seoul's military says the North's actions are raising tensions on the border and could have fatal consequences. The latest broadcasts include K-pop songs and regional news. Researchers in central Taiwan have found that adding probiotics to rice paddies can cut down on greenhouse gas emissions. They're working with the Reelection County government to find ways to reduce gases released after fertilizing crops. Initial results show the probiotics can lower methane and nitrous oxide emissions by at least 80%. With climate change intensifying, the team says it hopes to expand the initiative even further.
因为咱即卖的碳排放那么多，气候嘛拢无做好，所以咱若为本身开始做，会对大家较好。
Thanks for joining us for What's Up Taiwan. Download our mobile app on your device to get more of our news reports on the go. Finally, check out these animals enjoying some icy treats to combat the scorching heat at a zoo in Rome. I'm Eric Gao. Take care and have a great day.